Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of what I wish I knew as a beginner plant parent. I say part 2 very loosely because part 1 was uploaded maybe a year ago, maybe more. I also say beginner very loosely because I still very much consider myself a beginner plant parent. There's so much I don't know, but every now and then I like to kind of compile my thoughts and gather a list of things that I've learned over the years that I wish that I had known, or I wish that someone had been able to be there to like guide me through the beginning parts when I first started to get serious about plants. It's when I got serious about plants that the collection grew and the supplies, like I started buying a lot more supplies, and I just wish that there was more information out there that was a little bit more distilled. There's just so much advice and guides to wade through, and it can be very contradictory. I still stand by what I said in that video, I think. I haven't watched it in a long time, but from what I remember I talked about, I still believe those things, but I have more to say. I didn't really bring anything in here to show you, so I'm going to just be adding in clips and stuff of any examples of plants and things like that as I go. Obviously the only plants you can see are back here. So this is gonna be a very chatty video, so if you got nice cup of tea, nice cup of coffee, glass of wine, you can just sit back and relax and let's just have a chat. So before I get into anything, I just want to make a quick disclaimer. I am not an expert, and I am a firm believer that there are no rules in plant care other than plants need water and plants need light. Outside of that, it's all a bunch of gray. There's so much diversity in plants, there's so much diversity on this earth, and plants are found grown everywhere. I just really don't believe in rules, and hopefully this video is just to provide some perspective on some commonly held beliefs in plant care. So yeah, that's just my precursor. So I kind of wanted to start off and discuss, like, how do you know who to filter out? What kind of advice to filter out? I gave this a lot of thought, and I guess what I can say is like who I filter out, who I choose to listen to. Knowing how much advice is out there and how much people are just like clamoring to give advice to each other in the plant community. So I'm very aware that I'm giving advice right now. So you can choose to filter me out, you can choose not to, you can just, you don't have to listen to anything I'm saying. So I'm a part of a good number of plant groups that on Facebook that are very full of people from all over the world, different growing conditions. I would say probably the majority of them are centered in Europe and North America, but there are a lot of people from Asia in there as well. These groups are supposedly filled with very like serious plant people, which means that I lurk in them. I don't comment, I don't post, I just read, and I would say a good amount of reading. I scroll through it a lot, and for sure I've gained a lot of knowledge through being in the plant groups. I've read through a lot of plant care advice that a lot of it's like very ridiculous, but a lot of it's also super good advice or just super good information. Facebook is really good for getting botanical information on plants, just very scientific, matter-of-fact information. And definitely like plant influencers are like wanting to give a lot of advice because it's kind of like the bread and butter. How do you curate like a list of people that you trust with methods and substrates and products with your plants? So I'll tell you kind of my approach to deciding who I'm going to actually listen to. And by listen to, I mean like if let's say I've never tried this certain technique or this certain product, substrate, fertilizer, whatever with my plants, and this person was to tell me, do it, just trust me, it'll change your life, I would trust them blindly. Like that's the kind of person I'm talking about. For me, that person is definitely, I have a few of these people. 3 of these people are my friends. So obviously you trust your friends, and you trust your friends to know you and your collection well enough. So I'm gonna kind of leave Charmaine, Jing, and Lauren out of this, but they are people that I really trust to give me advice, like very just unbiased, straight to the point advice. They have nothing to gain from it. The person I really wanted to talk about as kind of like a model person and the right kind of person to be listening to for plant care advice is Amanda, my dear friend Amanda. So Amanda is Bunny on Instagram. I don't know her in person, so we are just internet friends. I've never met her in person, although one day hopefully we will meet. Amanda's definitely the kind of person where I will just blindly listen to what she has to say because I trust that she has my best interest at heart, because she knows what she's talking about and she's not going to be gatekeeping anything in terms of plants. So let me explain why she's a great plant role model. And Amanda, if you're watching this, I'm so sorry to put you in the spotlight, but it's what you get for being a great person. So I guess Amanda, first of all, has the credentials. She's been growing plants for a really long time. She has a very large collection. If you've ever seen her house, it's just kind of like wall to wall of plants, and the plants are freaking humongous. Some of her plants, I think, but belong in a botanical garden. Like, it's that level of large where most people can't grow plants to that size and maturity indoors, and she's somehow able to do it with very little, I guess, very little fuss. Like, she doesn't really seem to baby her plants. She has a strong understanding of what they need, and she just kind of doesn't overdo it. So I trust her that when she's telling me to do something, it's a little bit more like, you know, the essentials. So one thing about Amanda is that despite having like an incredible collection, and she definitely knows way more than myself or Charmaine and anyone I know, I think personally, she doesn't talk to you like you're an idiot. So much advice is presented like a command, like get that monstera out of pond and put it in soil. That is just not Amanda's style. Whenever she gives me advice, she would say, you probably already know this, but this is what I've done with this plant and here's the result. Like, she's very thorough in how she presents her advice. She definitely doesn't hold back on advice that is maybe like a trade secret that, you know, maybe only her and some elite plant people know to, I don't know, like grow plants better, because she is a plant seller. So I mean, some of these things that she knows and she's sharing could be like a trade secret. It could be like a product related to nutrition or something that helps her plants grow really big and really fast. She's really free with that information. She really doesn't have anything to hide, and she for sure doesn't fearmonger. I find so much advice is thrown around like almost like threats, like do this or else your plant will die. If you don't use chunky aeroid mix, your plant will die. If you don't have drainage holes, your plant will die. Amanda is, she's really open to trying anything, and she's really not the one to shut down any methods, even though she's not one to use it. The people I avoid listening to at this point are the people who present plant care as rules. Not that the rules have no truth in them. They certainly do. Like drainage holes for sure would help some people, but it's not that black and white. So if someone's gonna be telling me advice, like commanding me to do certain things without taking the time to understand my growing conditions and what the plant even is, then I find it really easy to just tune them out. I don't think they have my plant's best interest at heart, because I don't think they took the time to understand the situation. So yeah, just because someone has a super nice collection and really beautiful plants does not mean that they know everything, and does not mean that they're willing to share that information with you. I'm specifically talking about like people who maybe go on Facebook or Instagram and flex like a really nice plant, like a really big plant, nice new growth, and people ask them questions and they don't answer, or they give like very short answers that maybe don't tell the whole story. Then like I would probably in that instance just be like, all right, he doesn't want to tell me, I'm not gonna listen to his advice, because like he's not giving me all the information, so that's fine. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, I wanted to talk about a huge topic that I wish I knew, which would have saved me so much money, first of all, and so much time and money. And I guess space in my house, because like I've built up a lot of stuff in my house that now I don't need and need to find new homes. So how to save a ton of money on plant supplies by knowing exactly what you need. And there's definitely going to be experimentation, and people want to try products and see if they like it for themselves. For sure, not everyone's going to have the same experience with any given plant product, but I've spent way too much money on certain supplies that I wish I never did, and I'll tell you what they are. So I think the parts of the plant hobby that I've spent the most money on, besides the plants themselves, are the substrate amenders, the pots, and the grow lights. So let's talk about substrates first. When I started to get really deep into the plant community, because before the pandemic, I wasn't really part of any community. I was just kind of like watching YouTube's videos every now and then. I don't know, maybe Googling stuff, but I wasn't, you know, interacting with any other plant people. So this is more specific to the aroid community, but the idea of like a super chunky aroid mix. So I talked about this in my part 1 video, but I want to talk a little bit more about it because I want to talk about it in the context of saving money. So substrate amenders are way more expensive than just like bagged soil. So the more you amend it, the more it's going to cost you. I wish that I knew that I don't actually like soil that chunky, and it actually doesn't work well with my style of plant parenting. Chunky aroid mix is one of those things that are presented as like threat style advice. Like, if you don't do this, then your plants will die. So often when people ask for advice on their plant, like there would be like 5 comments saying like, get into a chunky mix. But there's definitely been instances where I've seen like the plant is not suffering from any sort of issues related to aeration in the soil. Like if you look really closely, this plant has thrips or something like that. It's not anything to do with substrate, but people really hound each other on the chunkiness of their soil, when I can attest to the fact that oftentimes aroids don't benefit from a super chunky mix, because the chunkier you make it, the more you're gonna have to water it, and the less water retentive that substrate is. And if you can't be watering your plants every 2 to 3 days, then your plant's going to suffer from underwatering, and that can lead to a whole host of other problems. So over the past couple of years, I've definitely been like cutting back on how chunky I make my soil, to the point where I wouldn't even call it very chunky anymore. I wish I'd have had a bit more perspective on, you know, that rule of having super chunky soil, because that would have saved me so much money. I used to mix my soil mix with like no soil. It would be just coco coir, coco chunks, perlite, a ton of bark, charcoal, leca, and I can tell you my plants did not grow very well in that time, because it just did not suit my conditions or my watering habits. Nowadays I just use the bagged soil, coarse perlite, some bark, reptile bark is what I use because it's quite cheap compared to like the orchid bark that you can get in like plant specific stores. And then basically those are like my must-haves, and then I just throw whatever leftover amendments I have from other plants into my soil mix and call it a day. And it works just fine. My plants are growing better now than they ever have, and I don't mean that it's just purely because of the soil mix. There's definitely other factors in that, but if the soil mix was as chunky as it used to be, I would be killing all my plants with underwatering and dry rot. If you live in a humid environment and you have your plants outside and they're getting rain all the time, or if you like to water a lot, you have the time to do so, then by all means, like, make it chunky. Like, if that works for you, then great. But I wanted to kind of dispel the advice that's often just like freaking pounded into people that the soil must be chunky. Yeah, the soil needs aeration, and the soil can't just be dense, muddy peat moss, but it doesn't need to be as extreme as people say. Now, I do use substrates that are on the expensive side, so I'm talking specifically about lechuzapon and tree fern fiber. And orchiata can be quite expensive too, which is a component of my preferred pond mix. But to me, that's not a waste of money because it actually works really well for me. But there are certainly ways to provide a very similar experience for the plant without spending money on like the specific lechuzapon or this really nice coarse perlite. Like, you can definitely give and take a little bit on the quality of the amendments to cater to your budget. The only thing I don't think really has a very great and alternative to is tree fern fiber. You could argue that it's very similar to coco coir maybe, or yeah, I don't know what you would compare it to, but it's just not the same. The results aren't quite the same. So to me, tree fern and pond they're not a waste of money because I'm actually using it, enjoying it, and the plants are loving them. So it is a lot of money, but it's not a waste of money. Okay, so over the past year, I've been purging so many pots, so many cover pots that I have no use for, and like they're not even really worth anything, but I've spent so much money on cover pots that I thought were cute, and I just like, it was during a time where if I walked into a plant store, I needed to buy something. I couldn't leave there empty-handed. So I'm like, well, I have all these plants, or like there's really no plants here, so I'm just gonna buy a bunch of pots. It was a waste of money, honestly, because they don't really match. So until I had enough plants to curate more of an aesthetic that I like to grow my plants in, I didn't really know what I was looking for. So I just spent money on every pot that looked cute, but together as a group, they don't go together. So I've given a lot of pots away. I've sold none. I didn't sell any. I just gave them away. I also spent a ton of money on orchid pots with the side slits, which I no longer use. I fully understand the purpose of the side slits, and like, don't worry, I get why they're there. They don't work for me. It's not that I hate them. I just would prefer the side slits weren't there, because those side slits have caused more headache than helped in my experience because of the plants that I'm growing. I'm not really growing orchids. Not that orchids can't grow without the side slits, but I've spent definitely hundreds of dollars on those orchid pots, and I don't reach for them anymore. I do reach for the orchid pots without the side slits, the ones with just the drainage holes at the bottom. They're not my favorite. My favorites are the larger orchid pots that are clear on the sides with drainage holes, because it's hard to find clear pots that are on the larger side. I wish that they made like way bigger pots. Like I wish they made like big, I don't know how many gallons that would be, like a 16, 18, 20 inch pot. That would be amazing, but they don't. But I wish I had somebody telling me their reasons for not using the slit pots for aeroids before I went all in and bought like dozens and dozens of each size. Like I just didn't question it. I didn't question that there might be a downside to slits, you know? So I would have saved so much money on pots if I had switched to no drainage much sooner. So I'll tell you my perspective on the benefits of no drainage. So first of all, no drainage opens you up to a lot more options in repurposing vessels for plant growth. So what I mean by that is, if you go into any thrift store, you're gonna find like, you know, glasses like this. You can find short little cocktail glasses. Those can be used for small plants. I use a lot of those, and they're great for like Hoyas or like propagations or little baby anthuriums. They're awesome for that. You can also get like the bigger ones that I use. They're often sold as, I don't know what they're sold for. I'm trying to remember like what IKEA markets them for, and I just don't know. Candles, I guess. Like people use them as like part of centerpieces, but they're often dumped at thrift stores, and they're often available at dollar stores. So thinking about like a ceramic cover pot being like, I don't know, $20 to $40. I mean, much more if it's like from a nice ceramicist, versus like $2 at the dollar store. And don't get me wrong, I love good pottery. I think it's so beautiful when people have a really nice pottery collection for their plants. But if you're thinking about pots for plant growth specifically, and you're kind of growing plants not just as like house decor, but you have, you know, a collection that is just like you're cultivating to get them to grow as fast as possible, and you have plants like by the dozens, like over 100 plants, the amount of money that it would cost to put nice cover pots on these would be just gag worthy. And on top of that, no drainage allows you to kind of repurpose almost anything. Like if you have a candle jar or a deli cup, coffee cups, yogurt cups. There's that meme where it's like cheap plant in a expensive pot, or expensive plant in a yogurt container. As people start to gather more plants, they're going to not want to use really expensive vessels for their plants, because they also know like they're not going to live in that pot forever, because with the love, care, and attention you put into it, the expectation and the hope is that the plant's going to outgrow that vessel in like 4 to 6 months. So no drainage would have saved me a ton of money in that sense, and it saves me time It definitely saves me time. Unpotting a plant no drainage means that everything is contained in that pot, so you're not like trying to wrestle roots that have escaped out of drainage holes. And it also, well, I'm specifically talking about clear vessels. Clear means everything matches. Like, you don't need to worry about matching a pot to the plant. It just is the supporting character. It kind of stays in the background. So no matter what style of pot you have, like whether it be like a glass or it's like a different type of glass, it all kind of goes together. You can obviously be repurposing non-plant things into drainage pots by drilling holes into them, but with no drainage you just don't even have to do that. But anyway, I definitely did talk about like the no drainage thing a lot in my original video. So what I want to say is that no drainage, if I had just stuck with the glass vessels from the start, I would have saved hundreds of dollars on pots. No drainage is definitely not for everyone. I'll give you an example. Lauren does not do no drainage for the most part because she has a warehouse full of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, thousands of plants. You can't water a warehouse like that slowly. You kind of have to go through with a hose and just water it and like allow it to drain out. Rot definitely still happens, but it's definitely not a good use of her time to be planting everything in no drainage and then watering everything with intention. There's definitely instances where no drainage would not be a good call. I know that Lauren's not against no drainage or anything for her personal plants, but for something as big as her collection, when you're growing plants in big trays and it's just like wall to wall of plants, no drainage can be kind of time consuming to water. But at the same time, clear pots help you to kind of see who needs water in the first place. Anyways, I could go on no drainage for forever. So let's move on to making friends. Making plant friends, and they don't need to be like, you know, real life friends or anything, but you know, real life friends are even better. Having plant friends within Facebook plant communities is very helpful because you tag each other in purges. You could do joint purges and you can just kind of chat about plants with each other because no one in your personal life understands what it's like to be a plant parent. But plant friends mean you can cut down on a lot of costs because you can bulk order certain things that would cost a lot of money, either through shipping or like you have to buy a smaller quantity of it that's like not as great a value. So having plant friends has meant that like I've cut down on a lot of my costs for substrates mainly. So humongous bags of perlite, big bags of tree fern fiber, humongous body bags of leca. I don't have the space to store that, but I'm able to pay like a fraction of what I would normally pay for like a smaller amount by sharing it with like usually Charmaine. Usually me and Charmaine the ones like splitting things in half, but if there's a lot of things that I would split, like we would split 3 ways with Jing as well and also Lauren. So that has definitely saved me a lot of money. Buying substrates in bulk is definitely the way to go if you know that you like that substrate. I wouldn't buy a humongous bag of it if I was trying it for the first time. Another thing that I waste money on and would also simultaneously be shareable amongst friends to cut down on costs is fertilizers. So I've definitely saved a lot of money by buying fertilizer and just like, you know, portioning them out. We did that with TPS1, I did that with Dynagrow, although Dynagrow is not the most expensive, but then I saved half that money and fertilizer can last you a really long time. So fertilizer is just one of those things where it's kind of confusing to people who aren't very scientific like me, but you can kind of like, once you see a fertilizer come up many times and you know that the people who are recommending it have really nice collections, really happy healthy plants, have been growing for a really long time, then over time you can kind of trust that this is probably a good fertilizer. And certainly like a lot of fertilizers will do the job, and really a little goes a long way, and a bottle of fertilizer would last you so long. So it'd be much more economical to get a bigger bottle and split it into 2, 3, 4 parts with friends. But I've also definitely wasted money on things that are talked about as fertilizers that aren't actually fertilizers and are more soil conditioners, like liquid dirt. I hated liquid dirt. I thought liquid dirt sucked. Like, it didn't do anything for my plants, and it was really dark and ugly and made everything brown, and having to like dilute it multiple times, it just it just all felt like kind of a waste of money and a waste of time. So I gave my liquid dirt away. Marfil, I don't see a difference with Marfil. At the same time though, I know at least one grower who pretty much exclusively uses Marfil and his plants are freaking gigantic. But it didn't really work for me. So maybe I'm just, you know, not blessed like he is. But those soil conditioners, they're not nothing. They're not no nutrients for your plants, but you can definitely get more bang for your buck by getting like a solid, widely used fertilizer. And if you're new to fertilizing your plants, then you could start with something very accessible like Schultz, or I think Dynagrow is quite accessible as well, certainly if you're splitting with a friend. So the next thing that I'm still learning about, but I really, looking back, I knew nothing about, is light. And specifically my understanding of natural light and how strong it is. When I moved into this home is around when I started to really start accumulating more plants because I had so much more space to grow plants in. And I really thought that I had the light. Like, she thought she could grow plants in this room without supplemental lighting. No, it's not happening. And I really thank this device a lot on helping me understand natural light. I don't really super understand natural light that much, but I understand it so much better now having something to take readings with. So this is the LTH meter from Houseplant Journal. So here are the current foot candles that I guess you're getting, the camera is getting. I've got it set to read light in terms of foot candles, and it also tells you the temperature, which is freaking hot right now, and the humidity in this room is 41%. I use it primarily for light. I don't really need to know the temperature that much, but humidity is helpful because all my hygrometers break. But this, I mean, this is mainly a light meter for most people, but it has these added benefits, being able to read temperature and humidity. So this has been able to tell me so much about how much light can change with just one small position change or one tiny obstruction of light. So I used to think I could grow plants in this room, and I thought that the light was pretty bright. I take my Instagram photos in here, so I figured if my camera is not going to be super grainy with this level of light, then surely it's enough light for my plants. Nope. Case in point, this plant that I purchased for this room is a Philodendron Rojo Congo that is fully dead. Fully dead. It was summertime when I got the plant in here, so it was the most bright this room could ever be, and it wasn't enough. It kept dropping the lowest leaves. It wasn't using up the water enough, and it just kind of fully rotted, top down, dead. And another plant that I tried to grow in this room was a Ripsalis Paradoxa minor. So the Paradoxa minor was growing so well on my plant shelf. It was under 25 watt Monio lights or 24 watt Monio lights. My light readings for that shelf, you know, depending on how close to the grow lights, but that Ripsalis would have received somewhere around 400 foot candles. Those lights can be quite strong. So I brought it into here, thinking that there's going to be a part of the day when the plant receives like direct sunlight. When the sun comes down here, it's going to be shining across the wall at the plant. And I was like, it's going to do great. It's going to look so good on this like floating shelf. And the plant rotted, like it rotted from the stem. The roots plus like this much stem started to turn black. And I had to chop it up multiple times and reroot in water. So now it's rehabbing downstairs. It's not gonna come back up here. So the thing about natural light is like, I wish I knew perceived light is like so much more optimistic than what that plant is actually receiving. Not even considering like total number of hours of light that the plant's getting. So I have this fiddle leaf fig, a little bambino, on my desk. And on a sunny day, but not in direct sunlight, it's getting somewhere around 400 foot candles. But just like maybe 2 to 3 feet away from that window is my Dean McDowell, and it's getting like 50 foot candles in light, and that it's so much less than I thought those plants would be getting. I thought the Dean McDowell was quite close to the window and would therefore be getting quite a good amount of light. I wasn't thinking about it in terms of foot candles, obviously, but I would have considered that bright indirect light, and nowhere close. So the light meter has definitely opened my eyes a lot. You don't need a light meter Like, it's not a necessity, but if you want to understand if the light conditions are good for a plant in a certain spot and actually have a reading to help kind of guide you, then a light meter is really helpful. You definitely don't need a light temperature humidity meter, like all in one. It's a really nice to have, and this is an awesome product. I'm so glad that Daryl made this. I also purchased this with my own money. He did not send this to me for free, but I have no regrets. I really love this thing. It is like something that I'm just so glad that this exists on the market. But if you have no plans on getting a light meter, the only thing you could take away from this is that natural light is actually a lot less than what you think. And the plant will tell you that. Unfortunately for my Rojo Congo, he was the casualty in that. But yeah, it was a long road of denial for me that I couldn't really grow any plants in natural light in this house. Everything pretty much needs grow lights. So I mean, you'll notice behind me I have a really nice monstera. Well, I mean, I consider it really nice. I've been very open about my inability to grow monsteras. They just don't grow for me. I love them. I love them so much, and they're always going to be like one of my all-time favorite plants, but they don't love me back. We're finally getting somewhere, and I was able to put a grow bulb in that floor lamp, and I put 2 plants here that are too big for my plant room. So they've started to spill into the space because the plants are getting too big to be on a shelf with other plants. They kind of needed to be alone. So below that you'll see is my Florida Ghost that used to live in my plant room, and that was just like, it has a wingspan, like a humongous wingspan. It's probably like the same as me with my arms outstretched, or at least it feels like it. And it was just way too big to be in there. So it now lives here, and both of them are growing so well. The Florida Ghost is flowering. It's the first philodendron I've been able to grow from like a really small baby plant to like a flowering size, and it started happening when it was here under this light. So I was sent the Sanzi grow bulb to test out and give you guys a review on it. So this was sent to me for free. I was not giving any sort of guidelines on what to say. There was no creative brief, nothing. It was just like, try it out and just tell people what you think. And I really wanted this bulb because I had specifically this lamp in mind and this room. I wanted to be able to grow like a big plant, like a floor plant, and nothing I currently own would really super fit that in terms of like positioning the bulb, you know? So this was actually something I was looking for. They reached out and I was like, yes, please. I would definitely love to try it. And my thoughts on it are that like, I've been using it for about a month. These 2 plants are plants that appreciate higher light. Certainly the Florida Ghost does. They are very happy. I really like the temperature of the bulb. It's very much like just white daylight. I would compare it more to my mother light. I also have a Russo plant light. They're all very similar, not cool, but very white. They're not as yellow as say like my Marina lights, which are warm, but not like super orangey warm. Let me just turn on the lamp so you guys can see. Okay, I'm just gonna tilt you around so you can actually see. But yeah, that's pretty much what it looks like. It's very, very white. So it basically has like a E42 fitment. So I need sort of regular like light bulb fixture. It would work. So 36 watts is quite strong. It's like the same strength as my Russo light. It's very similar strength as my mother light. And I'll just show you with my phone what the foot candles are the Monstera was receiving and the Florida Ghost. For sure, I would probably switch these 2 in terms of proximity to the light, according to what they prefer. I think the Ghost can definitely take more light than the Monstera before it starts to get bleached, and you know, the light can help the Ghost to be more ghosty, but I kind of wanted the Monstera to be a little bit higher up and be a bit more of a focal point because I'm just so proud of this growth. It put out this really big leaf. Let me actually just show you. So I repotted this around summer of last year, so almost a year ago, but not quite a year ago. And it was a very sad rehabbed cutting. So it was a 1 leaf and it hadn't grown for 2 years. If you've been watching my videos for a while, you would have seen this monster many times, but look how many leaves it has grown in the last year. And this leaf that was put out in this spot, it's just wonderful. I really love this one and how deep the pennations go on it and how like plasticky the leaves are. It's definitely become like one of my favorites and it's very happy in that spot. So anyway, my thoughts on the bulb are that the look is really nice, the aesthetic, the warmth of the light, the brightness is very bright. It's definitely effective in growing the plants. It's very easy. You don't need any sort of special fitment. Like you could in theory just plug this into your ceiling, and you can get a really cheap like just a light bulb fixture and just hang it from somewhere, even if it's temporary in the wintertime when you want to supplement lighting. It's not super cheap, but it is really bright and it is effective. So if you were just to kind of compare it to more like premium light bulbs like Soltex, Lucians, or Russo, it would be a little bit cheaper to get a Sansi bulb and like get it to fit into like your preferred light fitment. Or if you already have a floor lamp like this to use it with, I would recommend it as a grow light. But I would definitely classify this as a non-essential, like a really nice to have, not a must have. You would definitely get more bang for your buck if you were to put it like something like this, but a lot more plants, like a big cluster of plants kind of grouped together. It would definitely feel like the price was more worth it. But in any case, I do have a coupon code. It's temporary, it's not gonna last forever. And I also do not make any commission from this, so it's just purely a coupon code if you wanted to try the light, but it's just Alice15. So I'll leave the product link in the description for you guys if you are interested in trying a light like this. It's very big and very intense looking. I spent a lot of time buying grow lights like a few years ago that were more like geared towards tents and like greenhouses and not really geared for like households. So I was like Velcro taping them to the ceiling and it looked so ugly. This is like definitely a way more aesthetic approach and it would have been a lot more useful for this room. Although I am kind of concerned that like with these bulbs, I am going to be putting plants in every room, which I don't really want to do. So I do need to check myself a little bit. But anyway, I'm gonna turn that light off. It's getting really hot in here. Also on the topic of light, I mean, this is related to that Rojo Congo, may he rest in peace. I would advise not to buy gigantic plants unless you are certain you have the lighting conditions for them. And also that you have experience with this genus or something very similar and you're quite confident that this plant can thrive in your care, because a big plant is usually more expensive and a big plant is really hard to find optimal conditions for because it is so big. So I'm not talking about if you have like an outdoor greenhouse that has tons of space and lots of optimal conditions. I'm talking about like, you know, the rest of us who have very specific small spaces that we need to fit our plants into, like a shelf or like a small plant room. I've purchased big plants and just watched them kind of die back or like turn juvenile because I didn't have the proper conditions for it and it was too big to fit into anywhere that had optimal conditions for that plant. So it's definitely been a lot of learning on my conditions specifically as it pertains to light. I wish I had utilized light meters earlier on so I can actually like see physically how much difference one little obstruction can make. Like a cloud can go by and the foot candles will go down significantly. So yeah, I've learned so much more about light and natural light over the course of using this light meter. And I know I didn't, you know, present it in a very straightforward, cohesive way, but hopefully that can shed some light on what we think bright indirect light is versus what bright indirect light actually is. Okay, a couple more and then we're gonna wrap things up. This next one's a really simple one, really short. I wish I'd known that it's not wise, in a sense, to invest a lot of money in alocasias that are like new to the market. The first pricey alocasia I ever bought was an Alocasia Silver Dragon. This was in 2020. I paid $100 for it. I don't like thinking about that, but I did. And I really jumped at the opportunity to pay $100 for it because it was like, you know, it was 2020, plants weren't really that available, but I didn't really know until, you know, a couple years had passed that like pretty much every alocasia ends up in garden centers. All the alocasias that were new to the market and started out quite expensive are now in garden centers and are very cheap for like $5, $2, $10. So like the green dragon, the alocasia variegated Frydek was in garden centers, black velvet, Aslanii. It was really only a matter of months after they were introduced to the market did they like just end up being everywhere. And I don't know what the reason is I don't know if like TC Labs jump on alocasias because they are quite popular, or if they're just quite easy to TC. I don't really know the reason, but all I know is that they always end up being TC'd really soon after being introduced to the market. So I wish I hadn't spent so money on alocasias in like earlier 2020, but you know, you live and you learn. It's kind of like a rule for myself that I don't spend more than like 20 bucks on an alocasia, because it really isn't worth it to me, because they kind of just propagate themselves. Like they have these little corms that grow out and you just have to divide them. So the chances of them being very readily available quite soon are quite high. And I'm not talking about like variegated alocasias, because I know those are quite a hot commodity right now. Like everybody seems to want like the variegated black velvet and what poly, and I'm a little bit confused as to why everyone's after the variegated alocasias, because it seems like everyone's kind of conveniently forgot that variegated alocasias are super unstable for the most part. Frydek, I feel like, is a very stable variegated alocasia. They don't just like suddenly revert. So I'm confused. If anyone could shed some wisdom on why people are spending so much money on variegated alocasias, I would love to know, because it doesn't seem like a very wise investment personally. Okay, very last one for today. I feel like I could go on about all these topics forever, and I definitely would have left some out, but the last one I want to talk about is I wish I didn't grow in moss for as long as I did. So I've been pretty open about the fact that I don't grow in moss anymore. I don't use moss as a substrate as much as I can help it. The only time I choose moss as a substrate is within a moss pole, but not really for like the terrestrial roots of the plant. So it took a couple years of heavy use of moss to realize that the cons definitely outweighed the pros for me. So the pros of moss is that it's very light, it's very water retentive, and it's really easy to pot things up in. The cons for me are that it's the most difficult substrate to unpot a plant from. Removing moss from roots is the most difficult compared to any other substrate. There's no nutrition in moss. In fact, if it's used for too long, it will start to break down and become acidic and even more water retentive, and it can kind of kill your plant's roots. And it's so hard to rehydrate once it becomes completely dry. What else do I hate about moss? It is so light that if it becomes completely dry, then your plant is like very likely to topple over. There's just so much that I don't like about moss, and like it's also not very great for the environment, depending on the source of the moss. It's always a good idea to keep our consumption of moss in check. So considering all of those things, there's just really no reason for me to ever use moss again as a substrate. I do have like moss like in my house that I've purchased in the past, but I'm still working through, and I only use it for moss poles. But yeah, I don't even really like moss poles that much. There's my hot take. I don't like moss poles that much. They are kind of a pain in the ass. I understand the benefits of using them, and I know that it works, but they're a freaking pain in my ass. That's not to say I won't use it. I still use moss poles. I still plan on using them, but I wish it wasn't necessary for large growth in climbing aeroids, but it kind of is. So here we are. Quality sphagnum moss is not cheap. It's not the most expensive substrate, but it's not peanuts. I'm definitely not saying that it's wrong to use moss, nor is there no benefit in growing in moss. There's definitely plants that would probably thrive in moss over anything else. But for the types of plants that I'm growing and my watering habits and where I'm placing them, moss really offers zero benefit to me, other than being able to be used in moss poles without falling out of the pole. It's really the best substrate to use in a lazy pole setup, but you know, there's ways around it. Like I could definitely see myself living a completely moss-free life. I wish I knew the disadvantages of moss before buying so much moss, because really the discourse around plant care and substrates is that like everyone just loves moss and recommends moss, and it's kind of just the default standard substrate to root plants in. So I would have definitely appreciated hearing about the disadvantages of moss sooner. I think that's everything I wanted to talk about today. I think I want to do this kind of video at least once a year and just kind of gather my thoughts and compile things that I've learned, because every day is a school day. Thank you guys for sticking through this very chatty video, and thank you guys so much for all your video suggestions from last week's video. It's super helpful. I've been adding them to my like running list of video ideas. It's going to be super useful for knowing what to film as I'm bulking up before I leave at the end of June. So yeah, thank you guys so much. Thank you for everyone who's here every week. I love you so much. I appreciate you more than you can know. I hope you have a lovely rest of the day, and I'll see you in the next one. Mwah.